What's up, y'all? My name is Chris Abbott, but all my friends just call me Abbo. And in this video, we're going to be answering the question, what keeps a church from growing, coming up. Now, according to the Barna Group, the average church size in the United States is 89 people. And church growth experts tell us that 85% of Protestant churches in North America will never break the 200 mark, right? So in this video, we're going to be talking about some of the reasons why churches don't grow, as well as exploring some of the things that you can do in your church to create healthy, sustainable church growth and smash through that 200 barrier. So let's dive in. Now, shout out to Carey Nieuwhof, because a lot of the principles in this video actually came from one of his blog posts on church growth and breaking the 200 barrier. If you guys haven't checked out Carey Nieuwhof, his website is fire and his blogs are super on point. So shout out to Carey Nieuwhof. Okay, so before we talk about some of the reasons why churches don't grow, let me just talk about some of the reasons that it's not. Okay, so it's not a lack of desire. I believe that most churches out there actually want to grow, right? It's also not because you have a lack of prayer. In fact, almost every church that I talk to has a desire to grow, and they've been praying, some of them for years on end, for church growth, even though they haven't seen it yet. It's not because of a lack of love, and it's definitely not because of your facility. There's kind of this limiting belief out there that if your church isn't big enough, or if you have a portable church, then your church can't grow, and that's it. But that's absolutely not the case. Portable churches have grown to thousands of people, right? So it has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not your church is portable or not. So Carey Nieuwhof says that the main reason that churches don't break the 200 barrier isn't spiritual, but they're actually structural. So let's dive in and take a look at some of the reasons why churches don't grow. All right, number one, your church is the best kept secret in town. All right, now, this is probably the phrase I hear the most from talking to churches all over North America, right? It's that, people tell me all the time, say, Abbo, listen, we've got a great church. We've got amazing people. Man, we've got pretty good music. We've got a decent website. And the people that come usually stay, but man, we just don't know how to get the word out. We've tried everything that we can think of, but my people tell me all the time that we're the best kept secret in town, right? And you've probably had people tell you the same thing, right? They mean it as a compliment, but it's not a compliment, right? What it means is that we have this great inside reality, but nobody knows about us, right? Nobody knows that we're here. So number one on this list is that you're the best kept secret in town. You don't know how to get the word out. A lot of churches stay small simply because they don't know how to effectively get the word out and invite people to church. So let me say this is a side note, and I won't go into detail on this because we have a lot of videos on this, but the answer, if you're trying to get the word out, is not direct mail, right? Direct mail is old, it's outdated, it's ineffective, it just doesn't work. So I recently talked to a pastor who had just spent $4,000 on a direct mail campaign. So when I asked him how it worked, he said, yeah, well, we got 4 new visitors that Sunday, so it kind of worked, right? And I just said, kind of worked. So you spent $4,000, so you paid about $1,000 a piece per visitor, right? And he said, well, yeah, I guess when you look at it that way. I said, okay, man, do you think if you took $4,000 out into the street, you could have paid 4 people $1,000 a piece to show up to church? He said, well, yeah, I think so. So yeah, I bet you to say you could have doubled your efforts by offering 8 people $500 a piece. I said, man, let's be honest, you probably could have brought in 40 new visitors by paying all of them $100 a piece, and it would have been massively more effective than direct mail. To which case, he kind of hung his head and said, dang it, you're right. The problem is direct mail used to be really, really effective, but it just doesn't work anymore. It's ineffective, it's outdated. So you're much better using those marketing dollars on something like social media marketing and targeted Facebook and Instagram ads. All right, number 2, small church structure. Right? So one of the reasons that a lot of churches don't ever grow past the 200 mark is because they're structured to stay small, right? So again, the reason that most churches don't break the 200 mark isn't spiritual, it's structural. So if your church is set up and structured for a small church, it's going to be really, really hard for you to ever break out of that structure until you build new systems and new structure. For example, take a look at like a small mom and pop corner store. right? So when I was growing up in Maryland, we had one of these. We used to go almost every day. Like we'd swing by. My mom loved Diet Pepsi, right? So because I was a good son, on my way home, I would swing into the Kemptown store, right? And I would run in and I'd go buy her a Diet Pepsi. And then I'd walk in the front door after football practice or lacrosse practice with a Diet Pepsi for my mom, just so she knew how much I loved her. They actually knew our first names at that corner store, right? We were there all the time. The owner was constantly working. In fact, most of the times you could find him somewhere in the back stocking shelves, right? His wife was usually working the cash register, right? Their kids were walking around kind of helping out with different things there and there. It's kind of this, family owned, right? Family run, family done. And so the structure that they had for running that little mom and pop store was completely different than the structure for running a large supermarket, right? So a couple years later, when I was in college, when I came home, I actually went to work for a large supermarket in town, right? And it was way different. The owner of the store wasn't stocking shelves, right? Like he was hiring and firing people. He was managing the team and he had managers underneath them, right? And so it was a much different structure. It's the exact same thing in our church, right? If your church is a small church and you're structured like a small mom and pop store where you're kind of doing everything, then you're not going to be able to grow past the 200 mark, and you're definitely not going to be able to scale past 400, 600, 800, and 1,000. It's not spiritual, it's structural. So you actually have to have the systems in place and be able to structure your church for growth. All right, before I get to my last couple of points, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel because we're putting out brand new videos every single day, 5 days a week. And if you hit that little bell notification, then you'll actually get notified every single time we drop a new video. All right, number 3, superhero syndrome. Now, this is really common in most churches, and I can tell you in all the years I've been in ministry, I struggled with this a ton. In fact, when I was a youth pastor, this was the definition of my role, right? I had this superhero syndrome where basically I did everything, right? I'm sure you can relate, especially if you're in a smaller church. A lot of times, it's not just that you're wearing multiple hats, it's that you're wearing all the hats, right? It's literally like you are Superman and you do everything. So you do all the marriages, you do all the funerals, you do all the marriage counseling, you do all the hospital visits, you do the sermon prep and the vision casting and the fundraising, and you recruit volunteers, and right, every single thing that's being done is being done by you, right? Call this superhero syndrome. This makes it really, really tough to be able to scale, especially if you're trying to scale past the 200, right? And so part of the reason is because of something in social psychology called Dunbar's number, right? You may have heard me talk about this before, but this is the idea in social psychology that basically every single human being can effectively manage about 150 relationships. Anything more than that, and relationships start to fall off, right? And it can even implode from the inside. This is kind of tough. This is why a lot of people don't like to grow past 150. And not just pastors, we're talking people in the church. It's because as you start to grow past 150, what happens is now you don't know everybody's name, because if you're managing about 150 relationships, they are too. But if that church starts to grow to 170, 180, 200, 220, 250, now you can't know everybody and it feels different. Right? And so growing past that can be uncomfortable, not just for you as a leader, but also for the people in your church. This is why it's really important to be able to cast vision and talk about where you're going and why you want to grow the church and the impact that your church is going to have in your community. So you can effectively grow your church to about 150. And if you're a really, really good leader and really good at multitasking, maybe even 175, but anything more than that, and you're going to have to switch over and start building a team, and you pour into your team and your team pours into the relationships of the people in your church. It's the only way you'll be able to scale past 200. And that leads me to my final point number 4, and that is increase equals pain. So when you as the pastor are the primary caregiver, what happens is the only way to continue to grow and to continue to reach more people is to run faster and work harder and to work longer hours, right? I'm sure you guys can relate. You're running on this hamster wheel, and the more people that join your church, the bigger the mess, the more people you have to visit in the hospital, the more marriages and funerals and marriage counseling, and the more mess that you have to clean up, right? Because ministry is messy, right? People's lives aren't super clean and easy. Someone that comes into your church for the first time and gets saved is coming out of a lot of stuff. And a lot of people have emotional baggage that they've kind of carried with them, and there's drama, right? And so what happens is if we're not careful, we start to associate increase with pain. right? We start to think, okay, wait a second. If my church goes from 80 to 160 and we double, we're gonna have double the amount of people. That means double the amount of drama. That means double the amount of hospital visits, right? That means double the amount of mess. And what happens is no matter how much you logically want to grow and want to reach new people, right? Subconsciously, your mind isn't gonna let yourself get there and do that, because the only way that you know how to do that is to run faster and work harder. So you start to associate increase with pain. So twice the amount of people begins to sound like twice the amount of pain. So if you want to get out of this rat race and get off the hamster wheel, then you as the pastor cannot be the primary caregiver, right? And the answer to this is small groups. You're never gonna be able to be the primary caregiver for every single person in your church, especially if you wanna grow past 150 and break through the 200 barrier. So the best way to do this is to launch small groups, and now the small group continues to take care of the needs of all the members. So whenever someone's in the hospital, it's not you going every single time, but they're reaching out to their small group leader, and now the small group is the one that descends on the hospital and prays for them and takes care of them. Whenever there is a death in the church, it's not you that's going in and taking care of that person and making sure to bring over food and sending up meals. Right now, it's their small group that comes in and puts together the meal train and makes sure to drop off dinners every single night for the first couple of months, right? Whenever there's a new baby, same thing. This idea of you being the primary caregiver, you're going to start associating increase with pain. And so the only way to do that is to make this scalable. And the answer to that is small groups. 98% of pastoral care is having someone who cares, but it doesn't have to be the pastor. All right, so I have a free gift for you. If you want to learn a little bit more about some of the tactics and how you can specifically use social media, Facebook and Instagram in order to grow your church and attract new visitors, then head on over to churchgrowthagency.com. I've got a free video that you can watch that's going to walk you through a framework that we've been using for churches around the country that has helped to bring in over 60,000 prayer requests and over 7,000 new families that have planned a visit to the churches we've been working with. So click on the link in the description below, go over to churchgrowthagency.com and check out that free video.